Hello, my name is Sam, and I'm here with attorney Avita Samaru.
Hi Sam, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. And this is Ask Avi, a forum where we go over some of Florida's most pressing personal injury questions. So recently we went on Reddit and found a lot of questions that a lot of different users submitted regarding personal injury. Just to get started, the first question is, if I settled a case and was still injured, could I hire you for another claim for that same case?
Just like a lot of answers in the law, it depends. It depends on several different factors. One of the things that we want to look at is if you released anybody that caused the accident, and we also want to look at what insurance companies are available and which insurance companies you settled with. A release is when you actually sign a document, and usually it'll say release on the top, and that document is where you're releasing the person that caused the accident or somebody that may be at fault for the accident in some way, shape, or form of any future claims, and basically you're waiving your right to sue that person. So when you sign that release, if you want to make a claim against that same person, then you're going to be barred from doing that. So there's no recourse with regard to making a claim there. But sometimes you may not have signed a release, and if you didn't sign a release, then we can still go after that person for the true value of your injuries, because theoretically you would have settled it for less than the value of your damages. Also, what we'll do is we'll look at what insurance companies are available to you. Sometimes there may be other people that may be at fault for the accident. We have to look at the full picture to really understand that, and we may be able to make a claim there. And then other times there's something called uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage, which may be available to you in a circumstance like this. So the key here is that you should never sign a release without first consulting an attorney, and never try to settle a case on your own without consulting with an attorney, because what happens in those scenarios is that usually you're settling it for less than the true value of your case.
Gotcha. Another user submitted a question. Someone hit me and lied about their identity. What can I do now?
You know, that's a shame. Sometimes that happens in Florida. A lot of times people get scared. They may be illegal immigrants. They may not have a valid driver's license. It may be suspended, and they'll lie about their identity. The number one thing to do here is to be proactive. Call the police to report the accident. Call the police, report the accident, and report your injuries. Ideally, a police officer should come out, take a report, and help you gather their information and confirm their identity. Now, the reality of it is sometimes that cannot happen, because the police may take several hours to come out, you may be in a rush to get somewhere, or the other person may be in a rush. If something like that happens and you cannot call the police, then what I recommend you do is get out your cell phone. We all have smartphones. They have cameras. Keep it charged while you're driving. Take pictures of the license plate, the driver's license, the person, and in fact, if they caused the accident, get them on recording and ask them what happened. I had an accident like that recently where the other person tried to flip the story and say my client was at fault, and she was smart enough to take out her cell phone at the scene. In this particular accident, they didn't call the police. She felt bad for him. She thought that he was drunk. He had USAA, which is military insurance. So she was trying to help him, and she felt he was somebody that provided service for our country. She didn't want to call the police. She wanted to help him, and then he went and flipped the story. But what she did was she got out her camera, she took a video of him, she asked him what happened, and he told her on the camera exactly what happened, which put him at fault for the accident, and that actually helped save her claim because she was smart enough to do that. So you want to call the police, and you want to act fast. Even after that, you want to contact a law firm such as Samaru Law, because we can start the investigation process after the accident with regard to getting any kind of camera footage that may be available, dash cams that may be available, witness statements, and so forth. Another thing that you can do that's really good here is you can contact Samaru Law before this happens, because we have our free dash cam giveaway, and we can install a dash cam in your car.
Amazing. How do people know about the dash cam giveaway, and how can they sign up for it?
So you can find us on social media. Just follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and so forth, and then you'll be able to click on one of the links that advertises the dash cams and sign up. And then once you sign up, you'll set up an appointment to come into our office, and then we'll install it on that day.
Oh, that seems easy. Awesome. Yeah. Another question is, I was in an accident and the other person does not have any assets to contribute. What can I do in that situation?
Unfortunately, that's something that I see happen very often. You have to understand the nature of Central Florida where we live. It's a very service-based economy. A lot of people work for theme parks and so forth, and some of these folks make very minimal wages and they have a lot of responsibilities. So all in all, they may not have assets. What I would do in a scenario like this is I would look at their insurance and see if they have something called bodily injury coverage. If they do have that, then we can make a claim there. If they do not have that, then hopefully you're listening to all of my advice, because we do these podcasts quite often and we've talked about the importance of uninsured or underinsured motorists on your policy. If they don't have that, then you can make a claim under your own uninsured or underinsured motorist. And what that insurance company does is they can pay out towards your injuries. And now this is your own insurance. So they're stepping into the shoes of the person that caused the accident. They can compensate you for your injuries, and they themselves, as the insurance company, can pursue the folks that maybe didn't have bodily injury, or if they didn't have enough bodily injury, then at least you have your uninsured motorist to make a claim with.
Yeah, gotcha.
You always have the right to sue somebody that caused injuries towards you. The issue is it worth suing them? And we have to look at their assets to decide if that makes sense, if they don't have an insurance policy or a big enough insurance policy to compensate you for your injuries, because you don't want to be in a position where you've spent a lot of money on pursuing a lawsuit, getting a judgment against them, and then having to collect. So the key to this, and the takeaway from this question, is that you always want to have uninsured motorists on your policy, so you're not in a position to say, what should I do? This person doesn't have anything to contribute.
Gotcha. In your opinion, why do you think there are not enforced restrictions and policies on, bodily injury and uninsured motorists being required in the state of Florida, or just in general?
Yeah, so it's just the nature of our kind of political landscape right now. So do I think it's right? No, I don't think it's right. I don't think that it's right that you can be hit by somebody and they have no coverage or no bodily injury coverage to compensate you for your injuries, because you have the privilege of driving in these big, heavy vehicles and they can cause major injuries. But it's more of an issue that you'd have to take up with your lawmakers.
I slipped and fell at an amusement park. What steps should I take now?
So the number one thing to do is report it to somebody that's there, get medical assistance immediately. If you fill out an incident report, snap a shot of it on your phone so that we can see exactly what was reported there. Take pictures, or have somebody take pictures of the scene for you. If there's any visible injuries, take pictures, and you're able to, because there's sometimes that you may not be able to, but have somebody take pictures of your injuries as well, and then contact an attorney as soon as possible, a skilled attorney that knows how to handle that, to preserve the evidence, to get the witness statements, and so forth.
Gotcha. Is that also a 2-year statute of limitation you have on filing claims for stuff like that?
For the most part, yes, it's a 2-year statute of limitations, but you don't want to wait 2 years. You want to call immediately. And even if you're not able to, have a family member reach out on your behalf so that everything can get lined up and set up properly. In slip and falls, it's important to preserve evidence, video footage, and so forth. And if you wait too long, that evidence may not be available. For example, sometimes there's surveillance cameras that capture things, and that surveillance is recorded over itself on a rotating basis. So if you wait too long, then you may not have access to that as well.
Gotcha. And those statutes would apply similar to like stores, malls, stuff like that. So it's like a generalization.
The law that applies to a slip and fall type of case, when somebody slips and falls or trips and falls on a business property, when we're trying to prove negligence and who's at fault, is that the owner or operator of that property either has to know that that hazard is there, or they should have known under certain circumstances. So a lot of times they don't know. So how do we prove that they should have known? It's through circumstantial evidence. And if we don't act fast enough, we're missing the time frame in which to preserve that evidence. So if we don't know how big the puddle was, for example, or what exactly was on the floor, then it becomes very hard to prove that they should have known that this was there.
Gotcha. So that's why keeping a record of absolutely everything that happened as soon as possible is the most important thing.
Exactly, and contacting your attorney with that information and allowing them to do their investigation to prove your case.
Gotcha. This next question has a little bit of a story behind it. So this individual is asking who he would go after or file a claim against in the scenario that his child or a minor was injured from construction debris that was from a construction job being performed on another person's house. Who would this father have to file a claim against if his son, daughter was injured in a case like this?
Yeah, so we also see a lot of construction going on in Florida and in a lot of, even in public places, we see things like that. And the people that are performing this construction or the owners of the property have a duty to secure the area, to make it safe, to warn people with warning signs, warning tape, and so forth. So the number one thing when you're investigating, or when I'm investigating something like this, is I would look at who's at fault and why. And if this construction company left debris out willy-nilly, so that this kid could get hurt on it, then I think the construction company would be liable, but also the homeowner has a responsibility to make sure that the area is secure and so forth.
Another random question for you. So if hypothetically I were to be golfing and while on the course a golf ball strikes me in the back of the head, what kind of claim would I be able to make in a situation like that?
That's an interesting question. I think it's something that probably comes up a lot more than we would think because of where we live here. All of us would probably like to be in the golf course, but none of us want to be in that experience. Yeah. I think you would look for liability to see who's at fault. Maybe it's the golfer, him or herself, like they did it, but maybe the golf country club or the club didn't do enough to protect other people in the area. So you would kind of analyze it on a case-by-case basis. But my friend Marcos made a good point too. Maybe when you're on the golf course, you're assuming the risk.
That's very true.
So
that's very true. So I guess it's dependent on where you are at the time of the accident.
Yeah, exactly. Where you are, what you're doing, and who's responsible for it. Or is it just like a freak accident that you happen to be in the path of the golf course? And then in that case, I don't think there's any liability.
Gotcha. Next question is, I'm wondering if a smaller law firm has the capacity to sue a multi-billion-dollar company just as good compared to a large firm.
100%. In fact, I think, obviously we're a smaller law firm here at Samaroo Law. I think when you choose a boutique law firm, you're getting more personable experience and you're getting the kind of care and fostering of your case that's necessary to bring it to fruition and to its true value. And we do that all the time.
I recently got an attorney, and I've been thinking about seeking and consulting with other attorneys aside from the one I got to represent me. Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, and you are 100%. And this question kind of leads from the last question, where a lot of people may hire the wrong law firm, and it's not exactly the right fit for them. And I get a lot of calls from clients or potential clients where they're with a law firm and they're not getting the information or the service that they need. So what I usually say in a scenario like that is you should write down the questions that you have. What is it that you need to understand? And that's probably the hardest part, because if you're not getting communication, you don't even know what questions to ask. But you need to take time to formulate the right questions and contact your attorney, contact the law firm, schedule either a teleconference or an in-person meeting with your attorney and go through those questions. If you're satisfied with the answers, then maybe you're in the right law firm, or maybe you're in the right place and it's fine to stay there. But if your attorney, number one, doesn't call you back, then as far as I'm concerned, that's probably the worst thing that can happen. Or they're not explaining things to you in a way that you understand, or not taking the time with you that you deserve, then I think that's the point when you can start looking for another law firm. One thing that's important to know is when you sign up for a contingency fee case, and contingency fee means that you're not paying your attorney up front, you're going to be paying them out of the settlement proceeds. When you sign up for that type of case in Florida, then your lawyer is required to give you something called a statement of client rights. Go back to that document, read it through. It's the same for every single contingency fee attorney in Florida. So it's the same document you would get whether you came to my law firm, Samaroo Law, or you came to another law firm, and you can read it. And right in that document, it explains that you have the right to change attorneys if you're not satisfied with your attorney for some reasons. Does it always mean that it's the right thing to do for your case? Not necessarily, and that's why I give you those questions or go through that with you.
Gotcha. Very interesting. I was hit by a cop while they were in pursuit of someone else. What can I do?
Sam, you always give me the toughest questions. It's a multifaceted question in so many regards, but I'm going to do my best to simplify it and answer it as easily as possible. We have this idea of sovereign immunity, and what sovereign immunity means is essentially the king can do no wrong. We came from England, we became independent from England, and we took over those notions from England too. The king can do no wrong. But the reality of it is that's why we left England. So we have a waiver of sovereign immunity written into our law, and that's written in the statutes. So the statute says that you can pursue the government when the government causes injuries to you for a certain amount. Now, the waiver of sovereign immunity has another exception to it, and that has to do with police officers in pursuit of other people and causing car accidents. And that's what you're asking about here. So when an officer is in pursuit of another person and causes a car accident, the officer can be immune from liability if the officer is acting reasonably, if the officer reasonably believes that the person they're pursuing is a forcible felon, and if the officer is following the written protocol of the agency that he or she works for. If those three criteria are met, then the agency is going to argue that the agency cannot be pursued because the officer was following these three rules written in the statutes. My job would be to attack each of those elements to prove that the officer wasn't acting reasonably, didn't believe that it was a forcible felon, and wasn't following the written protocol. Because a lot of times we see officers really like jetting through like traffic and speeding, and they really don't have the right to do that if they're just trying to stop somebody for a stoplight violation or a traffic sign violation. So they have to follow their protocol.
My attorney dropped me recently because they said the person I was in a crash with had no bodily injury insurance. What can I do now?
So the number one thing to do is what I kind of stress all along, if you listen to any of these podcasts or anything, is you need to have adequate insurance in your own policy. You need to have uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage on your policy so that if somebody doesn't have bodily injury coverage, instead of pursuing that person individually without any kind of chance of recovery from an insurance policy, you can make a claim under your policy, and your insurance steps into their shoes, compensates you for your injuries, and guess who has the pleasure of pursuing that person if they want to? Your insurance company. You don't have to do that because that's always an option, but you really, really have to think about the investment that a lawsuit takes, the time, the energy, the money, and what you're looking at recovering. And if somebody doesn't have any assets, then you've got a problem there.
Gotcha. What is the difference between mediation and arbitration?
It's a good question, and a lot of people don't understand that, but because I do this all the time, it's easy and natural for me. Mediation is when you're going to an independent party that's not taking any sides, and that party will hear both sides of the case and try to facilitate a settlement. So in mediation, you can think of it like the parties actually talking to each other to get the settlement done through a mediator. In arbitration, the same thing happens. You present your case and you present it to an arbitrator with all of your evidence and everything that you may present in an actual trial. You'll present that to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator will make a decision themselves about your case. So mediation, the parties make the decision whether or not to settle. Arbitration, the arbitrator tells you this is what you have to do and this is why. So there's two types of arbitration. There's binding arbitration and non-binding arbitration. Binding arbitration, you have to follow the arbitrator's decision. Non-binding, you can decline to follow the arbitrator's decision.
I recently got into an accident and it was not my fault. How long do these cases usually last?
Just in any other legal answer, it depends. And it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on what your injuries are, what policy limits are available, what treatment you've done, and so forth. There's so many different things that we look at, and it's so case specific, so it's hard to give you an answer. But generally, it should take between 9 to 12 months to settle your case. If we have to file a lawsuit, which will ultimately be your decision, at some point I may recommend it after analyzing all the factors in your case. But if you end up filing a lawsuit, then it would take longer, and you would go through the litigation process. And at that point, we're somewhat at the mercy of another law firm scheduling mediations, depositions with us, and also the court getting us on the trial docket. So we're kind of at the mercy of other people's timelines. And in that case, it may take another year or 2 years beyond the initial time.
So it's always easier to answer how long do I have to file the case, not how long do I have to settle the case, because with filing it's a 2 year statute.
But this is what people are concerned with. This is what my clients are concerned with. How long does it take? Because your time is valuable too. So your time, your effort is valuable. So you have to have a good understanding of this. Even though it's a hard question to answer, you should always ask your attorney this question, and you can ask them at different stages. Because if you ask them right off the bat, they may not. It's more of a general answer, like what I gave you, 9 to 12 months, something like that. But if you ask them after your case is developed, what they may tell you is that I see that your injuries are bad. I'm going to present what I have to the insurance company, and I think that may be enough to be able to resolve the case. And what I do at my law firm is we analyze the case at different stages to see when the case is ripe for what we call demand. And when it's ripe for demand, whether it's early on or it's later on the case, we're going to be submitting a demand to the insurance company demanding money. And we may be able to settle it early. And settling a case is one thing. We also have to close the case because we have to verify what liens you may have in place. Like you may owe hospital money, you may owe health insurance back some money, you may owe medical providers money. So we have to figure out all of that. And sometimes if we settle the case really fast, we may still have to wait for some of these billing processes to move through their system at the time frame that they do. So sometimes we're at the mercy of the health insurance to process a payment to the hospital and then tell us what they paid, and we just have to wait for that to unfold. But settlement can happen fairly fast if your case calls for it, and then we have to close the case too.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Let's say on average 9 to 12 months.
So this question's very interesting question to me, at least. What happens if someone hits my car due to a medical emergency they were in?
Yeah, so a lot of times we have people that have medical emergencies. If the medical emergency is unforeseen, then they may not be liable for the accident. So what we want to do is we want to look at all of the factors involved in this incident and see if it was something that they could have foreseen, if it was something that they had experienced before, and so forth and so forth.
You're not allowed to drive with epilepsy, right?
Yeah, in Florida, you can drive with epilepsy under the recommendation of your doctor. So you'd have to go through the doctor and report all of your seizures and so forth. But it's your responsibility to keep that information up to date, keep it honest and so forth. And not everybody is honest. Sometimes they don't report seizures because they still want to drive. In that case, I think that person would be held accountable for their actions because you shouldn't be driving if you've had it and and you haven't got the clearance from your doctor. There's something called the sudden emergency doctrine in Florida, and for sudden emergencies that are unforeseen, like you may lose consciousness all of a sudden, and there's no way to know that could happen, then there's a possibility that you may not be held liable. But the key to that is to hire an attorney that understands this so that they can go through everything. I've had cases with older people that have caused major catastrophic injuries, and we've been able to recover without any issue to this aspect of the law. Sometimes insurance companies will still resolve it because they want to procure that release for their insured and move on with the case.
I got hit by a commercial vehicle. Should they even bother hiring an attorney to deal with that or not?
100%. So, hopefully you're never hit by any vehicle. But if you are injured in an accident and you are looking at a commercial policy on the other side, theoretically commercial policies are usually bigger than the policy of a lay person. So that's when you see those higher settlements, usually the $1 million settlements and so forth, because those are usually what a commercial policy may look like. And it can vary. I've seen lower commercial policies too. In that kind of case, just as anything else, evidence is important because a lot of times there's a black box in the vehicle that we can procure and we can download the data from. There's dash cams on the commercial vehicles that we can preserve or request that they preserve, witness statements and so forth. And a lot of times commercial drivers are not following the rules. They're not getting the proper sleep that they need and so forth. And there's so much liability going on in that industry. So the key is to hire an experienced attorney that can handle something like that.
You're a Florida native. You grew up in Central Florida, so you definitely know how traffic is around here and how the roads can be built. If I were driving, on Old Winter Garden Road over here and I hit a fat pothole, and I got whiplash from it, would I be able to make a claim against the city for injuries from things like that?
Yeah, and possibly, the way it sounds, like a pothole doesn't sound like much, but it can cause major injuries. So let's just say, like, you go over the pothole, you get a flat tire, and then an accident like ensues after that. Yeah, you may be able to. You have to look at like the factors for who's responsible. Was there any warning of this pothole there, and so forth? But possibly.
It was raining really badly, and I sadly got involved in an accident. Can bad weather have any effect on my case?
So bad weather can definitely have an effect on the accident ensuing, and we know that because we live in Florida with hurricanes and bad rain and so forth. But it's also your responsibility to pull over, to be safe, to not drive when you shouldn't be driving. Even if it happens all of a sudden, I think it's better just to pull over, because even if you hydroplane and cause an accident, really it's your fault.
I was hit by a car, and the car that I was driving did not have insurance. What do you think I should do?
So theoretically, you are in a friend or another person's insurance. Yeah. You should still contact an attorney, because in Florida, we are considered a no-fault state. And what that means is that everybody uses their own auto insurance for personal injury protection. Think of personal injury protection like health insurance. That's generally what's available to pay the first portion of your medical expenses. Personal injury protection will pay up to $10,000 to the doctors. There's some caveats to that and additional things that it will pay, which is beyond the scope of this conversation. But let's say there's $10,000 on your own auto policy, even though you were in a car that didn't have insurance, on your own auto policy that will pay the doctors up to $10,000 in medical expenses. Then we'll look to the person that caused the accident, the at-fault person, look for the owner and the driver of the at-fault vehicle, or maybe sometimes there's multiple parties that might be at fault, and we can make claims there. And then finally, we can look to your own insurance for uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. So there's still a whole slew of policies that we can look for, even though the vehicle that you were in was uninsured.
Gotcha. One more interesting question that I found very interesting. If I was in an accident and the person who hit me did not live in the country, what can I do? What kind of claim can I make? How do I get in contact with this person? Like, what should I do?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun when that happens. I have had defendants in Germany, England, and China, and that's just all that I'm thinking of right now. I'm sure I've had many more in different areas. You still have a claim, just like any other auto accident. Usually those folks are renting vehicles when they come here. So what we'll do is we'll start with the vehicle that they're in, the rental company. We'll look at what insurance they purchased through the rental company and if they were using their own insurance. And we can attempt to make a claim directly with the insurance policy. The insurance company should be able to get in touch with them, speak to them, and communicate with them. If for some reason we're unsuccessful or we don't think they're making a fair offer, for example, then we may recommend filing a lawsuit. And when we file a lawsuit, we actually have to name that individual, and then we have to actually serve them in their residence, their home residence. And the idea is that they willingly came to Florida and they willingly operated a vehicle here. Therefore, we should be able to pursue them in the courts here, and we can. And the beauty of what we learned since COVID is that we can do these depositions via Zoom. Mm-hmm. So I've done depositions for defendants in Germany. I've done it in England and other countries too, where the defendant is in their home country, in their office or their home, and I'm able to ask them questions, and the only consideration we have to consider is the time zone difference.
Are there like service processors in these countries that you're able to like hire? Do we get them to do we have to fly them out? Like, what's the...
So you can either serve through the Secretary of State, mm-hmm. or there's another process where you can serve, because they chose to come here and operate here, we can serve the Secretary of State. That's one way. And then there's another process with regard to serving international. And when I say serving, I mean hiring a process server to deliver documents to them. Another process which we follow for a ton of international countries. For example, Germany, we can do it that way. England, we can do it that way. I think even China, because I had to recently look for...
That's a big country to serve on. That's a Good amount of investigation to do.
to find that person. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times, a rental car company has their driver's license, their address, and so forth. So another thing is people tend to be pretty mobile in today's world. So you want to just act fast to see if you can settle the claim. If you can't, then you want to move it into litigation so that you can't find them anymore. Because if they move, they have no obligation to report a change in address to a rental company that they rented a vehicle from when they were on vacation, 6 months ago or a year ago. So I think time is really important in that, and just moving fast, and making sure if you have to sue, you do it fast.
So I only asked this question because I know that there are international licenses that you can get to be able to drive in other countries. Are there similar policies you can get that help protect you or protect you in the case of a liability incident in another country? So if I'm from Germany or England or something, I'm visiting here and I get into an accident, do I have insurance that I can bring over with me or no?
Well, the number one thing is if you're like, let's say you go to another country, then and you rent a car, what I would do is I would look at my own insurance policy and see if it would cover me if I'm traveling internationally, and then I would also add any kind of additional policies that you can through the auto policy. And then there may also there's always insurance for everything. So you can also look for additional travel insurance, and when you read the terms of the travel insurance policy, sometimes that has bodily injury coverage to protect other people that you may harm when you're driving, but it's so policy specific that you'll have to go through the terms of the policy. So you want to make sure there's coverage for when you're driving. But I think the number one thing is to call your own insurance company, let them know you're traveling, see if it covers you there, and then procure it through the rental car company as well.
Interesting.
And that's what I like. If somebody's coming here, it's just much easier for me to use the coverage that they've gotten with the rental car vehicle.
So for PIP, if I go to Mexico this weekend, I go hang out with my friends, but I get into an accident while I'm in an Uber, come back to Florida, it's still within the 14 days. Can I utilize PIP?
It depends. It depends on your policy. So you're going to want to.
So that's all policy
It's
specific.
all policy. PIP is your own insurance. When you procure insurance with your own company, that's contractual. So you have to get that policy, which is the contract, and read through it. And if you don't understand something about it, even if you're not my client, my doors are open. You can contact us. We can help you understand your policy. If you're missing something, I'm happy to do that. In fact, when you come for our free dash cam giveaway, that's one thing we do with you. We talk to you about the importance of certain things on your policy, because a lot of people don't understand what a comp and collision is for their vehicle. They think that because the law requires that they have property damage, that's for their car, when in fact, if they cause an accident, or if somebody doesn't have coverage, or if it's a hit and run or disputed liability and they don't have comp and collision, there's nothing there for their vehicle, and they may be in a lot of trouble if they don't have anything to pay for the repairs, or if it's a total loss.
Free dash cam and free insurance knowledge. Why wouldn't people be signing up for this? Amazing. So just to kind of veer the topic a little bit, it's May. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. As someone who's been practicing in personal injury for a long time, and as someone who we've spoken about the importance of traumatic brain injuries and traumatic brain injury awareness, and how important it is to understand your cognitive health. How would you say in the last, especially year, has TBIs and TBI treatment become more streamlined in the personal injury field? Do you feel like it has? And if not, do you feel like there's anything we could do to get it more streamlined?
Yeah, I think that there's always, I'm glad that you asked that question, because it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I always have been, because what I see with my clients is sometimes they're experiencing symptoms and they just feel really lost. And a lot of other, not to throw anybody under the bus, because we're more aware of it now, but there's some law firms or some people that really don't understand it and don't know what to do when they see those symptoms. So they focus on physical injuries, broken bones.
What can I see?
What can I see? What do we know is going on? And the cognitive stuff, it's so hard to document and to explain, but the key is to have an attorney that's going to listen to you, understand what you're going through, or at least empathize with what you're going through, so that they can get you the proper help. I had a wife tell me once that my husband he didn't know anything was wrong with him. And she said to me, my husband is not the same man that I married. He's snappity, he's yelling at me, he's angry with me, and he was always compassionate and loving to me before this accident. And what we did is we did a kind of traumatic brain injury checklist that we have. And in this checklist, we're going to ask you what symptoms of a list of symptoms did you have before the accident and did you have them after the accident. And if you check off so many of those symptoms, then it may mean that you need to be evaluated for a traumatic brain injury. And in this case, we actually are the ones that did that checklist with this gentleman, and he had a very severe traumatic brain injury that was nothing that you could see. He didn't have any blunt force trauma to his head or anything like that. You did ask me if I think it's more streamlined. I think it's more streamlined. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and in the old days, sometimes you would see a diagnosis from maybe a neurologist or one of the doctors saying traumatic brain injury, but that was the end all be all. Nobody knew in those days what to do with this. And really what that means is you had some kind of concussion or post-concussive syndrome after, and then the symptoms that go along with that. You could have headaches, you could have memory loss, you could have temperament change, you could have sleep issues, you could have hearing issues, sight issues, dizziness, vomiting, mood issues, all sorts of things. Like you just don't feel like yourself because all of these things are compounded. And when you have that, if you ignore it, obviously you're going to have to just kind of learn to live with it. But nowadays what we see is once you're diagnosed with it, then they can offer you cognitive therapies that actually help a lot of people. And some of my clients tell me how much it did for them and how much better they feel. I have one girl that's in law school, and she said that it just helped her relax so she can focus on studying and focus on reading. It kind of cleared her mind so she can get back into that. And the therapies are very simple. In fact, a lot of them, just like any other physical therapy, you can do some of these things at home. So if you get the right guidance and the right medical advice, then you can get on the track to at least feeling more like yourself than you did before.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of what you were saying had to do with individuals, the emotional setbacks you suffer from a TBI, which is very consistent. Any cognitive, degenerative condition or any cognitive issue or injury is in and of itself anatomical, and it hurts you physically. So as someone who's been on not the giving end, but the receiving end of listening to your client stories, I know for a fact you've had countless of stories where people have been, telling you some of the most difficult situations they've gone through in life and some of the most depressing situations. So as someone who has to listen to a lot of these things, are there any mindfulness techniques or are there any meditative techniques that you use to try and implement to help help reduce stress, help reduce depression, help prevent those kind of things from happening? Is there anything you get from those kind of situations that you're able to pass on to your clients? Like, I know I'm not going through what you're going through, but as someone who's went through trauma, maybe you could try and implement this to help yourself.
Yeah, and obviously it's Mental Health Awareness Month, so not just to my clients, but to my colleagues, people in the medical profession, or people in any kind of stressful profession. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about that's valuable to everybody, even if you're not in an accident. You just really have to take care of yourself, your mindset, your health. What I do is I do yoga, I meditate, and that's the type of thing that works for me. But whatever it is that works for you, you have to find something to stay in a healthy state of mind. This type of work, at least the type of work that I do, and so many other people do things like this. Imagine how doctors feel. Or judges or different people in different professions like that I work with. I know like what they're going through. They tell me there's something called vicarious traumatization, and what that means is that when our clients come to us traumatized, or patients in the case of a doctor or anybody else in any industry that you're working with, if somebody comes to you with this trauma, we tend to internalize it. And sometimes that's what makes us good attorneys, or maybe might make you a good doctor, but you have to remember that that's not you going through that, so you have to separate yourself from what your client's going through, and at the same time still be there for them in the capacity that you should be 100%. So those are the kind of techniques that I do. I do yoga, I meditate, I keep your friends and family close, spend time with them, and so forth. And you have to be able to, separate, like, it's not you. You can't internalize it, because it's really easy to do that. I have been in my office many times crying with clients, and when my clients, tell me what they're going through, it's obviously really hard, because no matter what it is, we see injuries on a spectrum. You could have a herniated disc in your back, a bulging disc in your back. You could have a loss of a limb. You could have a loss of a loved one. I was in my office with a family that lost their baby just the other day. And you can't even imagine, I can't even imagine what that would feel like, but I'm sitting here crying with them too. And that's okay too, because it's authentic. I think being authentic to yourself is really important. It's authentic, and it's true, but at the same time, I cannot take that home to my kids because I have children at home too. And I'll talk to them about like things that I see and things, that I know. They're teenagers, they're starting to drive, drinking and driving and so forth. Those accidents are always so tragic, and it's hard to digest that, like when you're working in this capacity. So I think you're 100% right. You have to take care of yourself.
Gotcha. So, I think one sad thing that's been, coming around recently that I feel like it's just been more noticeable with the streamlining of mental health awareness and seeking help with mental health issues. One thing I feel like I've noticed is there is this generation, older generation, and I don't know whether it's a cultural tie or maybe it's just a notion of like, I'm good enough I don't need help. But there's definitely this culture in this, or just generation, where there's these people saying like, I don't need this help. Like you can see the effect that this TBI or this trauma has given to these people, and yet they're still choosing not to seek any kind of help. Is there anything that you found can help these people to motivate them to seek that kind of help? Because you're not trying to force them, but at the end of the day, you're trying to endear them to get better.
Yeah, exactly. Like I always tell my clients too, at the end of the day, if I give you $1 or $1 million, what does it matter if you're in poor health? Your job is to focus on your health, to try to get better as best as possible, because there may be a chance that you will not be 100% better. But if you could, like that's the best thing. It may mean less money to you, but you have your health, and that's the number one thing. Your question reminds me of the gentleman that I spoke about not too long ago, where it was his wife that was telling me what was wrong, and he was really resistant to doing any kind of therapies or treatment, even diagnostics. And he listened to he ultimately listened to his wife. So I think the answer is loved ones listening to them, because you may not know how other people perceive you, and you may not be able to identify that something's wrong. But when you hear it from somebody else and you know that there's help out there, that's a huge thing, because he was able to get some cognitive rehabilitative therapy that helped him a lot. And his wife reported to me that he was doing well. And on the other side of it, we settled his case for a multi-six-figure settlement because of this. So it was useful for us to understand the extent of his injuries instead of just sweeping it under the rug. And that goes for physical injuries too. If you don't understand them or you don't have a diagnosis, then how can we go make a claim that this is what you're going through? We need a doctor to evaluate you, diagnose you, and treat you. And if you get treated, hopefully you get better.
So you really describe it to them in a manner of, I'm not hoping to build up your case, I'm hoping to build up your strength.
Your health, your health. And what I say to them is your job is to treat, to try to get better. If you get better, it's wonderful. That's all we could ever ask for. And then if you don't, we can understand your prognosis, what your future looks like, and we can make a claim based on all of everything that you've been through and you've went through. So it comes down to all of that. But I think it's loved ones listening to the advice of people that care, including your attorney, because a lot of times we've seen it in different kind of scenarios play out. And one thing to understand is nothing is a guarantee with regard to medical care either, but at least you have a chance of getting better. And you may not be able to fully recover or be 100% the same, but why not try to get as best as you can be, because you have to live with yourself and you want to feel healthy and happy.
I think the transparency that you offer and provide, not only in the podcast but with clients, is the one thing that helps differ. Why this firm is different from other firms, and I think it's that level of personability. You guys aren't just personable, but you truly make connections and relationships with these clients to a point where you can have those kind of conversations.
No, I mean, and those conversations are important, because if you're not having those conversations, then you're missing a lot. If you're only speaking to the husband, and he's saying I'm fine, then you think he's fine.
You're
But
missing this whole story from the wife
you're
of how his
missing-
life is completely altered.
Yeah. So we represent individuals, but we represent families too, because everybody wants their family member back healthy and the same. So
Everyone's affected. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me and these answers. They were absolutely amazing. I appreciate it.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.